Alrighty, we are live. How you doing? Hello? Oh, I think you're muted for
I'm
a
doing.
second. How you doing?
Yeah, I was muted because I was getting things situated and I didn't want to be noisy.
Oh, gotcha.
I
Alrighty.
should be pretty good for the rest of the podcast now.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so we're talking about why each of us and maybe others value human life. Um, yeah, I guess go ahead and let me know your stance on why you value human life.
Okay. I view civilization, well, humanity, civilization, society, and modernity as a inverted pyramid. And I believe that it rests upon a grain of sand or a grain of sand works perfectly. And that very first grain of sand is respect for humanity. That
Hmm.
everything rests upon that. Everything that humanity has ever built in the last 2 million years rests upon that grain of sand, that it is the progenitor or the prerequisite of everything else that humans have ever created, including language, including um, all other forms of cooperation. That it is predicated first on respect for humanity. And that as we refine that idea more and more, we build up additional layers and create the enormous platform that modernity is today. Um, I, I view it as another way of putting it is like the nucleus, that the crystal of human understanding and truth has grown from. That first pure node of truth that humans ever recognized was the humanness in other beings.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and no. It makes sense. I'm just trying to figure out just to double check. So what you value about humans is just that they are human. And everything you just said is the description of why humans are so important in the universe.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. And I'm guessing that before humans existed, um, that if you were just to look at that time, that your value of what's existing would just be different. And then also, would you say that hypothetically you could imagine a world where some other being, like a future evolved being that doesn't exist today, would be that grain of sand?
No.
Okay.
Um, Aliens don't have the potential to be part of this structure that is humanity and all the way up to modernity. They can be sentient, they can be conscious, they can be intelligent, they can have wisdom, they can have discovered the laws of the universe in their own way, on their own terms, um, and everything else that humans have done. That doesn't make them human. Um,
Could they be more than human? Like, could they be?
yes.
Because it sounds like the grain of sand you're referring to, like where the highest value that you see in the world today, um, is it seems to be based off of the something like the good that can come from it. That there's nothing higher than it. So, but maybe that's not what you're saying.
No. It is inherently good in my perspective, but Um, what I'm trying to get at is the initial recognition of humanity. Um, let's go back 2 million years ago. Um, so the very first um, archaeological or historical provable thing that we can find and dig up was I forget exactly where it was. I looked it up, but it was apparently a little over 1.2 million years ago. Um, Homo sapiens sapiens, or one of their progenitors or whatever, um, had a broken femur, and it was a clean, full break. And then it healed at 3.5 degrees off of the true original path of the femur. Um, and it fully healed and was lived on by at least another 10 years after it healed.
Mm.
That is the first manifestation of humanity, of civilizations, society, modernity. Prior to that, prior to taking care of and healing a human with a broken leg so that they can go on and finish out their life pretty much normally, is the recognition that this is a human that has value inherent in their humanness.
Mm.
Um, and so, at some time before that, whether it was 700 years before that, whether it was 8,000 years before that, whether it was 90,000 years before that, at some point before that, the recognition of humanness in others, their capacity to reason, socialize, and communicate in some way, even if it's just gestures and so forth, existed before that point, that allowed the respect for humanity to manifest in the way that allowed a broken femur to be healed and lived on for 10 years. And that preference, or that what do you call it, recognition or deference or whatever else you want to call it, was the progenitor of allowing that to heal. And as humans grew in their capacity for reason and so forth, you get clay pots, you get the capacity to control fire, and it grows and grows, and eventually you end up with all of modernity as we learn to cooperate more and more together.
Gotcha. Yeah, and I had read a while back about that femur healing thing, and I think it is very fascinating because, for the most part, no animals in the world do that. And if you break a bone, for the most part, for most animals, you're just done for. And so, yeah, that is very cool. I do want to break down some elements of what you're saying, and so yeah. So if we take and I might not have a clear understanding of all the details here. But if we take the genus of human, and then we have all the different species within that, so you got Homo sapien is the most recent, Neanderthal, you got a Homo erectus. There's a few others, and like the earliest stage is Homo habilis. Um, so one thing I want to point out is you were saying that with the healed femur, there's gonna be a certain amount of time before that, that the first of what you're referring to as humans, um, whether it was, like, just through gestures or whatever it was, they started to work together in a way that became the femur and then now became what we have. Um and that whatever that is, the humans between then and now is what you value. So I guess what I would want to say is, like, let's say hypothetically that it is Homo habilis. Homo habilis was the first time that they started to work together in any way that would become the femur thing. Now, if that was the first time, now imagine that there was, I don't know, a couple thousand or a couple 100,000 of the initial members of Homo habilis that didn't have this vibe you're talking about, this ability, this interest to work together, but then a couple did, and then a couple did after that, and maybe some that had no interest in it saw it, recognized it, and were able to have interest in it. But then imagine if that might be, if we were able to look through history, that might be the starting point of what led to the femur healing. But then imagine all the Homo habilis that spent their entire short lives not playing a role in that, having no interest in that, not ever being able to think about it. Do you view them as part of the humans that you value?
Not necessarily. So, um, let me think how I want to word this actually. Um, at some point, and let's just go with Homo habilis because that's fine. I don't care. It could be glob glob and meow meow for all I
Mhm.
care. But at some point, there is a clear distinction where natural evolution ceased to be the driving force in human progression, and it became humanness
Mm.
rather than just evolution. And when we took control of our development rather than just random chance, that's when we went from uh, animal to human. Because I concede the point that evolution seems reasonable, that at some point a glob glob gave birth to a mew mew, and mew mews are human. And you had the first litter of humans, and these are the ones that would develop the capacity for reason and all that we recognize as human today. However, they were in their primordial state. Um, but they were irreducibly human, and their parent was not. So their parent, when they died, becomes a carcass, and those children that litter, when they die, become corpses. And that distinction exists because of their capacity to control their own evolution and make choices that are not random chance. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes. Okay, so if we were to, if you had a piece of paper and you're gonna make a list of all the things that make um, humans human, all the things that changed once it went from, I can't remember the blarp blarp to meow meow.
Mhm.
Um, if you were to make a list, would you say that that list of changes, like, so humans, the easy way just to say I value humans, but what you're valuing in humans, is it whatever that list would be that makes them different than anything before it?
No, I think it's somewhat intangible. I don't think it's something that you can carve out of chemistry or um, anything else that does it because I feel like it's more intrinsic and less substantive than
Uh,
that.
okay, well, I mean,
Um,
so let's imagine that whatever it was before Homo habilis that gave birth to Homo habilis, like, those 2 things are gonna be pretty darn identical. Like,
yes.
and so that there, and let's say that there is a noticeable change, that whatever before Homo habilis wouldn't let the femur heal, and then after Homo habilis would. We can look at a couple of details. We can go, like, within how this, new species or this new genus evolved, now there's this ability to, like, have a certain level of empathy or a certain amount of cognition, a certain, yes, a certain something or other, and we can look at something and go like, okay, so this thing, this species before Homo habilis did not have this. And maybe there's three things they didn't have. So it seems to me that if you don't value the thing in the same way as humans, if you don't value the thing that doesn't have these three things, but then the identical thing that does have these three things, that what you're valuing is that there is a vessel that those three things, once it's in the living vessel, that's what you value. And
Yeah,
I get that it's human. I get that it's the idea that it's intrinsically human, but that's just the easy way to say that what a human is, the reason you're saying you value humans is because of these handful of things. Because if you take that human and then you remove those things, it's something like not valuing it, right?
no. If you remove those things, it's still a human. Once this is what I'm trying to get at is the prerequisite to why cannibalism is wrong, why necrophilia
Okay.
is wrong, why abortion is wrong, why medical assistance in death is wrong, why eugenics is wrong, why genocide is wrong. All of those are subsequent those are like fourth order of effect transgressions in, and the progenitor, the first transgression in order to get to any of that is first to deny the humanity in others.
Okay.
Does that make
Y
sense?
it does, but what I don't get is the denying the humanity. We'd have to know what humanity means, and if humanity means that if you take these two, um, living species that are identical. In fact, you could have it be one living species, but you could have it be, whatever it is that it's identical. The only difference between the two is this one has the ability to look at another one and give a gesture that means let's work together. And the other one, it's exactly the same thing. Everything's the same. We can even call it the same species, but it is from 1,000 years before or 100 years before, and it's the last of its kind that just didn't have that, whatever that is that makes you give the gesture, let's work together, or the gesture that says, hey, if you help me let my broken bone heal, if you ever break a bone, I'll help you let it heal. And then, so if they're the same except for that thing, now it might be more than just that thing, but let's just say, because if you look at the difference between some other animal and a human, then you would see all these differences. So I'm just trying to take it to where you have essentially the same animal, the same human.
Well,
It's just it's not quite human. It's almost human. The only difference is they don't have that femur healing element. Then
so
yeah.
that still exists today with other human beings. So other human
Mhm.
beings today can still forfeit their humanity. And the easiest way to do that is to deny the humanity of others and victimize them sufficient that the laws and other things we have set up have stripped you of your humanity and turned you into a criminal, murderer, rapist, whatever. And so now we do get to kill you
Gotcha.
because you have violated that grain of sand that all humanity is based on. And so you have put yourself outside the group as a predator of the group. And even though Jeffrey Dahmer is completely human by all other respects, his cannibalism and everything else that he did, which was horrific and wrong, puts him outside the group of humans. And that's why law enforcement has the capacity to execute him, is because he has violated the precept upon which everything is built in order to enable collectivism or cooperation or anything else.
Mhm. Gotcha, yeah. Okay, here's one other way I'd like to look at it, and then we can take it a different route. But, you know how, Pluto used to be viewed as a planet, we had 9 planets, and then,
Hmm.
the scientists decided that the way they define planets, it either they defined it slightly different or they recognized that it didn't fit within the definition, and so it's like a dwarf planet or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
I not that I'm claiming that you're making a value claim on words, that your value claim transcends words. But like Homo habilis, for example, I believe the earliest stage of what we view as human now, I'm pretty sure it's kind of a toss up on scientists thinking that Homo habilis actually should have the Homo title removed and that it is the last stage pre-human, and but it's currently considered the first stage of human.
Yeah,
And
and
and so these things could change. Now, I guess the question I would have for you now, there would be different reasons that scientists might want to lump something into a category versus not lump it into the category, which your reasoning would be different probably than how the scientists are doing it. But like if somebody were to say um, that they think like if you were gonna say that you think like Homo habilis should be valued like a human, like because they are human, like what would it be that would make you think that it is or is not in the right category?
self-designation,
Okay. And
the
that only
capacity
has
to the capacity to designate yourself as um, a reasoned being, as Immanuel Kant would put it. Um, that a lot of it has to do with our capacity for thought and everything, but science is just chemistry. And I
Mhm.
believe that the presentation of reason and sentience and everything else is not simply from chemistry in the 3D world or 4D world, but that at higher dimensions, there is something that we can't interact with in the 12th dimension or whatever, um, that is the progenitor of human sentience, that gives it a unique presentation that allows humanity to exist. And so I'm fully prepared to accept that less than 10% of Homo habilis,
Mhm.
was it? Homo habilis were humans, and that 90% of them were primates. That's fine. I don't care.
Gotcha. So I guess what I would say is so if 10% of Homo habilis were humans and 90% were primates, then if you're saying that if a human, like, got Jeffrey Dahmer, but if you had a human that you remove all the qualities that you're saying makes them human, then if Homo habilis, after there had been thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of 10% of them being humans, then like if two of the human Homo habilis gave birth to a Homo habilis that from all things we could gather from your value system, that thing they gave birth to didn't have those qualities, what what would we call it? Would we say that's one of the current 90% of primates that 2 humans gave birth to, or how would that
Yes.
work? Interesting.
Yes, because Jeffrey Dahmer had human parents,
But you're
and yet
viewing
they
Jeffrey
gave
Dah
birth to a monster.
he's a monster, but he's a human you value, right? Or did I miss that part?
No, he excluded himself from that value from his own conscious choice.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Um,
The
would
the conscious choice to commit a heinous crime is a fourth order effect of abandoning this grain of sand that we're talking about. And in doing so, he put himself outside of that recognition. That's why law enforcement and everything else has the authority to, you know, confine him and execute him and everything else. You don't want to be doing that to humans, but humans who have forfeited their humanity by choosing to commit a crime,
mm,
they position themselves outside of humanity as a predator that needs to be dealt with as a predator,
interesting.
despite the fact that they were born to human parents.
Interesting. Okay, I think I had missed that part when we talked about Dahmer earlier. Okay, so if Dahmer was in prison and he was alive, and all the things happened that made you feel like he forfeited what he had that let you value him as a human. Now you don't value him. If he's just sitting there, let's say that the plan is he's going to spend the rest of his life in prison. If he is just like in this hypothetical magical world, he is just made to suffer. And you could just stop that suffering. You wouldn't be removing him from jail. He's still going to, or from prison. He would still be in prison. He's never going to get out. But you could either press a button that makes his suffering stop, or you can just not press it because you want him to continue suffering. Do you press the button?
So if I'm the prison doctor and he's been beat up by other prisoners and he needs to go to the hole and he needs pain medication, would I prescribe the pain medication? Personally, no. Do I think he should be prescribed pain medicine as a thought exercise? Uh, yeah, within reason. But
Yeah.
personally, I wouldn't. He has put himself, and many criminals have put themselves so far outside of this consideration that I personally would not give them pain medicine. You have a headache? Good for you. Go back to your cell. You got beat up and you have bruises and so on and so forth. Here's a blood thinner. Oh, well, I want a painkiller too. Too bad. Go back to your cell. Um, that's kind of the way I would treat it, because I don't have empathy or sympathy for people who proven that they have no empathy or sympathy for other humans.
Interesting. Okay. And it's complicated when it comes to the idea of, do we think this is how our system should be set up? If it was a doctor, do they have an obligation? That's why I just want to make it a hypothetical. I know some people aren't into hypotheticals, especially if it's a magical hypothetical. But
Yeah, I
it's just,
like to ground things in the practical decision making and a very real situation that you can put yourself in.
yeah,
The thing that I don't like about like all of these Kantian idealist stripped down trolley problem scenarios is they make less sense to me,
yeah,
because I don't like stripping things down into a binary
yeah.
or even a tertiary. Like, okay, there's three options. I don't like doing that. I see its utility in some cases, but reality is always thousands of calculus counterbalancing each other. And
Yeah.
so trying to pretend as though any one of those axes is the be all end all of the situation does a disservice to it, because you know when we were doing our abortion talk, you were like, if you run into a burning building, well, okay, but there are situations where running into a burning building, you would, if you have 8 people in one side of the building and they're behind a door and you can go that way, and there's one person on the other side of the building and you can go into that door, it's not a strict decision of which door you should go to,
Yeah,
because
I
there
think.
are other factors. So
Mhm.
if you go to the one with the 8 people, maybe you have now a workforce to be able to save the ninth.
Yeah, let me cut you off real quick. I mean, that's kind of the point of the hypotheticals is if you get into the real, then you don't get to understand the values of the person. If the idea of the hypothetical is to see how somebody feels about something specific, and then you figure out how it would work in real life, then you remove all the elements. So to me, that's why, like, so for example, I've been asked the question, like, if you take the worst humans ever, you take someone like Hitler or whatever, if like 5 seconds before his death, I could press a button that would give him the most pleasure in the world, or not press the button and then just he doesn't get the pleasure. From how I view pleasure and suffering, there's nothing bad that somebody could do that would make me want to not give them pleasure. So in Hitler's last 5 seconds of life, if I could press a button to get the greatest pleasure ever, if the question was, would you do it? My answer would be yes. And that tells you something about how I value things and how I view pleasure and pain and that kind of thing. If I had to like explain it in like some kind of a realistic way where it's like, oh, would I go to Hitler and give him a 5 second back massage or something? Then it just like, it removes that simple trying to figure out what we value. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand. There is utility in the hypothetical.
Hmm.
It's just that so many hypotheticals, I think, are do a disservice to the complexity of reality. And
Correct.
it hypotheticals too often are presented as a replacement for the decision. And I dislike that message going out because it can, in many instances, present the wrong decision to people who lack the capacity for nuance in the
That's probably
broader
true.
aspects.
Yeah, I guess depending on the conversation, I guess I just ignore those people. Like obviously, everybody learns things in different ways, and so those types of people, I would want them to have a better understanding of the truth and what's being talked about. But I wouldn't want to dumb down everything for those people and therefore lose the ability to
It's
have
not
like.
necessarily a dumbing down, it's a proper presentation thing that I'm talking about. So,
Mm,
humanity exists in a bell curve of intellectual capacity, and we're just going to assume, for the purpose of this conversation, that IQ is a perfect test
mhm.
and that the bell curve exists between 115 and 85 IQ points as a nice bell curve, and that encompasses 90% of humanity, which it largely does, but there's variations, there's issues with that in the real world. But for the purposes of the conversation, and 5% of the people are below 85, and 5% of people are above 116. Uh, because sometimes these nuanced conversations are happening between people that are of the top 5%, they can sometimes make it messy and give the wrong message to the bottom 95% and encourage bad behavior and or wrong moral sets
Hmm.
that cause far more problem than the thought experiment itself could ever generate in good.
Gotcha.
Um,
Yeah, and I get that. That makes sense. I guess for me, so the reason I have these conversations, like the one I'm having with you, is I guess it's almost kind of a selfish thing. I have it. Well, there's two reasons. I find it fascinating to challenge people on their ideas, especially if they like being challenged, and help them figure out their true ideas. But more so than that, I love being challenged on my ideas to figure out how I truly feel. And the idea of it being available on YouTube or wherever it can be available is just at the off chance that other people might find it interesting or get something out of it. So I do understand what you're saying. And if I had like a podcast that like got like millions of viewers and the idea was to educate people and to get like the masses to fully understand something, I think I'd be with you completely. Like in this case, like if I was being challenged on something, I would just want what challenges me perfectly for who I am, and then that can exist to the world. Because I mean, I watch a handful of debates or conversations where I have no clue what anybody's talking about because it's something that I'm not educated on, stuff with like neuroscience and whatnot. And I wouldn't want them to talk in a different way so I could understand it if the goal of their conversation is for them to broaden their own understandings and yeah. So, anyways, but I get you.
Yeah,
It just depends on what it is.
yeah, I understand that. And that's why most of these conversations historically and traditionally would be confined to university campuses.
Mhm.
Is because there is a degree of sanctity to shielding the population at large from concepts that might be damaging while we process and prune out the various um, discrepancies within it and refine it into something that can be presented to humanity at large and yield productivity and progress. And sometimes um, these conversations escaping confinement on the university campus in intellectual circles and becoming something that is popularized can be disproportionately harmful.
Mm.
Case in point is nihilism. Nihilism as a thought experiment in the universities is a wonderful exercise. Unfortunately, you have millions of people that have taken that to be their driving ethos and are being incredibly destructive to humanity because of them adopting this intellectual exercise as a core component of their worldview and paradigm with
Mhm.
which they see the world, and they become a destructive force that is far outsized the value of the exercise itself. You see what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, yeah, I definitely, yeah, I believe any possibility could happen. I'm not familiar exactly with what you're talking about, but I believe you. It just makes it tricky because I find it a lot easier if two people are having a conversation if they can just ask each other questions, answer their questions,
Yeah,
and
I'm not trying to censor this. I'm
mhm,
trying to frame it.
yeah.
Um,
I get what you're saying. Just the idea when I say with this a very simple hypothetical, if this human that has done this thing that potentially is making you devalue them, I'm trying to figure out to what level you're devaluing them. So if they were sitting in a corner and they were magically getting a lot of suffering and you could press a button to stop it, would you stop it? If you
no.
answer with the doctor thing, I don't know what your answer is and I don't know what you mean. But I think I just heard you say no. And okay, so that's good. Um and okay. So I'm trying to think.
So I view the suffering as a byproduct of their own choices, not a result of my choice. Uh, they chose to be excluded from the benefits of humanity, and that consideration to reduce suffering, of to all of the considerations to reduce suffering, to allow productivity and so on and so forth that we give to humans, you are forfeiting your access to that consideration when you choose to commit a crime.
Gotcha. Well, does it matter what the crime is, or are you just talking about extreme like murder, essentially?
Um, it doesn't need to be extreme. It can be burglary. It can be petty theft. Um,
Okay, let's just use burglary. Let's just say somebody knows somebody's on a vacation. They break their door down. They steal, I don't know, $10,000 worth of stuff out of their house, and then
well,
they take off and they're caught. They go to jail, or prison or whatever. So the what you value in humans, you do not value that in that person anymore.
no, because that person has escaped the window, and so now they're treated with humanity again because they're no longer in the act of the crime itself. So if if your wife and your kid and everything went on vacation, somebody realized that and assumed the house was empty and broke into your home, when they tested the doorknob, they forfeited their humanity. And
Interesting.
once they're in your home, if you use your shotgun and kill them, that is completely cogent or kosher or acceptable because they forfeited their humanity, even if it turns out that they were unarmed. Do you
Gotcha. Yeah.
understand what I mean?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. No,
so, and
I
the
totally agree with the idea of self-defense and somebody like if somebody is
and self
a
defense
reasonable
lives
threat.
upon this.
Well, if
This
somebody's a
grain of
reasonable threat
sand
to you,
is why that it. So this grain of sand that we're talking about, it yields self defense as a third order of effect. It
mhm.
yields a lot of things, and denying it yields criminal behavior as a fourth order effect. Um, there's a lot of things that come out of this. Basically, everything comes out of this because either you are recognizing the humanity in others or you are disregarding it and establishing yourself as a predator to humanity.
Yeah. No, I got you. Well, okay, so here's something I'd like to say. Okay. So imagine somebody's on their deathbed. They're 80 years old. They had mostly a great life. And then when they're telling you what experiences they've had throughout their life, when they were like 20 because of how they grew up in a certain area and just got mixed up with the wrong crowd, they spent like 6 months of their life robbing people. And one time they broke into somebody's house, stole $10,000 worth of their stuff. If somebody would have been there and shot them, it would have been reasonable, but nobody was there, so they got out. And then after that 6-month period, when they were about 20, they they opened their mind up, learned some stuff, and they actually changed their lives around, became a great person, and spent the next 60 years of their life just having a great life and treating everybody well. And they were just like all around amazing human. And they were talking to you on their deathbed and told you about that little 6-month period where they did these things that me and you would both call very wrong, deserved of prison, and potentially could have been at a justified death as well. Would you view that 80-year-old that's on their deathbed that mostly had this like amazing life and did amazing things for everyone? Would you view them as not a human you value because they did a thing 60 years ago?
N- let me reframe it in a more exaggerated way to emphasize my point. So, um, this 80 something year old individual went on a Caribbean trip on a thing in their 20s, and they got shipwrecked, and they were on some island for 60 days. And while they were on that island, um, the 600 other individuals that they went on that brooding cruise with, um, didn't get lost at sea. It turns out 4 of them survived onto the island, and they cannibalized one, um, and did that in order to survive, and survive long enough to be rescued. And so um, that was what was necessary at the time in order to survive and continue existing. Would I hold it against them at 80? Ever so slightly, yes, but not really. The 1/10 of 1%, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But um, the rest of their life is a proof that what they did was the right choice, because a subsequent principle is that which is necessary is legal. Um, and that's a dangerous thing to put out to everybody, because not everybody understands that principle correctly. But because it was necessary, um, it is in some regard excusable, even though it would otherwise be inexcusable.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even myself, like, if I was in a certain situation and I knew some of us are going to die and so forth, I have already had this conversation with close friends and others that I am completely okay with below the waist butchery. So, I've got some good meaty calves and thighs. And if the 12 to 14 pounds of meat that you can get off of butchering my lower body saves human lives, I'm okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Well,
You know,
I get you on all that. I want to bring it back to, well, I want to change a couple elements to see if I'm fully understanding this. Um, because you were saying, okay, so with Dahmer is an interesting situation, because if Dahmer had the situation that I gave in the hypothetical with the 80-year-old, um, the likelihood of if Dahmer didn't get caught when he did, he would just continue doing the things he did. And so you're pointing out that maybe if somebody does something bad and then they aren't going to do a bad thing again, it's because maybe the bad thing they did was necessary. So I guess I'm just trying to look at these situations, like how to know when to know this type of thing, because we both agree that if somebody's breaking into somebody's house, it's reasonable to shoot them because you could assume that they're going to take your life. This is how me and you view a good society and how the legal system works as far as your ability to defend yourself on your own property. We both agree with this. Um, but in one case, if a 20-year-old breaks into a house and steals $10,000 worth of property and then they leave, you were saying essentially you don't value them as a human anymore. They've
well,
broken
no.
this.
Once they escape the window of transgression where they're no longer committing the crime, they're just in possession of the proceeds of the crime.
Hmm.
Um, they do regain um, a large portion of their humanity. Um, and
Oh, I
and
didn't
so
realize the humanity that's lost is just in the moment, and that's why it's okay to shoot them. I thought you meant like if they get caught in the moment by the police and then they go to prison, that is a human you don't value.
um, it's a human I value less. Criminals are humans
Okay.
that are valued less.
Okay.
However, an active criminal is not a human. They are a predator. And so
Okay. Interesting.
so an active criminal, and or a criminal that intends to cause further harm, is not a human, they are a predator. And then a criminal that has been predatory and regained their humanity and choices and is remorseful is worthy of compassion and mercy and rehabilitation and everything. However, and proportionality of force and so forth and so on. But the reason why law enforcement has the authority to assault them and batter them and confine them and segregate them is because of their loss of humanity when they committed the predatory act, whatever it may be.
Interesting. Oh, what if we I'm going to use something from chat here. Somebody brought up the idea of speeding through a stop sign. If somebody speeds through a stop sign, between the stop sign and throughout that intersection, would you say something similar? Are we just is it just going to be smaller scale?
Um, it's going to be smaller scale, and um, if they blow a stop sign and get hit by a bus, um, they suffered those consequences in commission of a crime, and so there's a different consideration that's given to them. And
Mm.
I'm trying to explain that this grain of rice, or not rice, sand. I'm hungry. Uh, is the principle upon like it expands out in all directions, and the upward trajectories yield the upside down pyramid that is humanity, civilization, society, and modernity, as layers as you go up and further away from the grain of sand. And then other trajectories are criminals and cannibals and all of these other things, and
Mm.
they're deviations from the productive pathways that go upwards
Okay.
and
Well,
allow
let
you
me
to
ask
build.
you. I want to ask you a little more on this the stop sign thing, and then I have another thing from chat that I want to ask you. But from the stop
Okay.
sign one, so we both know that if somebody speeds through a stop sign, there's a potential that another car is going to hit them, and the person speeding through the stop sign might be the one that lives, and the other person dies. So them choosing to break the speed law or the stop sign law might take a life. So if we imagine that this is a possibility, this could happen, and somebody speeds through a stop sign every single day, and one day they do it, they don't hit somebody. The next day they do it, they don't hit somebody. But if they do this every single day, they might hit somebody, or they might go their whole life not hitting somebody. Would you say that the risk they're taking, knowing that they're doing an action that could cause a death, um, to somebody that's innocent, that's just obeying the traffic laws? Would you call that person a predator just in the
Yes.
sense just okay, well, I was curious, is it just in the intersection of where they're speeding through
Yep.
it,
Three
or is it
seconds a day, they are a predator.
okay. If you could, if they did it every single day, and for the foreseeable future, they're going to do it every single day. They didn't hit somebody yet, but they could, and you could press a button to just make them not exist anymore. Would you do that? And no judgment here. I'm just curious. 'Cause I because
Um,
'cause I think that's horribly risky behavior, and I have strong stances on, let's say, if somebody's drinking and driving, I don't know how many it would take before I'd press the button and make them not exist. But, anyways, just for the stop sign one, if they did it, 50 days in a row, and f you would have to imagine they're gonna keep doing it, and they might hit somebody, and you could press a button and make them not exist, or cross your fingers that they get tickets and lose their license. Would you press the button or just cross your fingers that they get caught and don't kill somebody?
yeah, so I, this is going to sound like a tangent, but it's really not. Um, every citizen a peacekeeper. So um, around that intersection are a lot of individuals. We're going to say it's a residential area, and they do this because it's a low traffic residential exit from where the cul-de-sac they live is. And they just always do this in reckless disregard of safety because they make a false assumption that it's low traffic. I always blow this stop sign at 4 o'clock in the morning because nobody else in this cul-de-sac is leaving for work at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm fine to always at 4 o'clock in the morning below this stop sign each and every day I go to work, Monday through Friday, blah, blah, blah. I would, rather than non-existence, because I do think that's a disproportionate use of force, I would want the Ring camera or whatever to be used as a watchdog, an unblinking eye, to be submitted to local authorities, police department, sheriff's department, whatever, so that they get the requisite response in liability and so forth. And even if that means we have to put in a speed bump in their cul-de-sac to prevent them from doing that, because it is a reckless behavior, because it should be punished, I would want there to be consequences, but those consequences need to be proportionate to the harm that has been done. And right now, as the point of me trying to press this button, it hasn't risen to the point of, taking a human life or causing irreversible harm or anything like that.
Okay.
But it has the potential to, and just the potential to yields consequences,
Mm-hmm.
but they need to be measured. And that's with all things, whether it's just, speeding or anything else. Like traffic violations, we all accept are the lowest, and it's the same thing with like shopping carts,
Mm-hmm.
somebody who never puts back their shopping cart is a horrible human being. And I wish specks of, you ever wake up and you get, your eye is shut because of sand in your eye, and like your tear duct overproduced at night and glued your eyelash shut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I wish they would wake up to that for the rest of their life.
Oh man, that's something else. I like it. I'm not going to take a strong stance on that. I think that would be a fascinating thing to analyze. But there are a few things I want to talk about. We got about a half hour left, and before I get into discussing like animals and different things, I was curious to see, because mostly I've been challenging you on how you view humans and why you value humans. And then I was just curious for a few minutes to see if you have thoughts on why I value humans and what you think might be wrong about it. So value is kind of a complicated word, but when I think of what it is about humans that would make me act in any form, um, what it is that makes me act in any form would be the main thing would be their ability to have pleasure or pain. Um, and so if I would not want a human to have pain. If I could prevent their pain, I would. If I could help ease their pain, so on and so forth. If I can give them pleasure, I would. Not to every extent on either of these things, but I value these things, and and then outside of those two things, so those two things are why I think they shouldn't. If they want pleasure and they don't want suffering, um, then that's why I would want them to have pleasure and not have suffering. As far as wanting them to continue to exist, that is just based on the idea that they want to continue to exist. I don't know how much of these stances are based on my own ability for these things. Um, I want pleasure, I don't want pain, and I want to continue to exist. I think I could be able to comprehend these things even if I didn't feel them myself, but I'm not sure. But anyway, so that's how I view why I have any value for humans. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah. So we did talk privately prior to this, and a lot of your reasoning, I dislike, because your 2 plus 2 does equal 4, but the way you present it is The reason 2 plus 2 equals 4 is because 16 divided by 4 is 4.
Mm.
And that's wrong, but you are getting the right answer. You see what I
Gotcha.
mean?
Okay.
Um, and so, um, I don't know how to explain this.
How should I be feeling that I am not feeling?
I don't know that it's a feeling.
Or thinking.
Yeah.
There's a couple ways to look at this. Depending on how you view free will and all this kind of stuff. Um, people people have the information they have the thoughts they have their intuition. And then people can learn more. You could tell somebody like this would be why to value this or why you should care about this, and then it wasn't that they were wrong about their thoughts or their intuitions before. It's just that they have more information now. So I assume that every day I'm going to hear new things that will slightly change how I view things. So it's possible that you have information that would make me go, oh, okay, now this is how I'm going to explain my worldview from here on out because I hadn't been thinking about this thing. So I guess what I'm curious is, what do you think I'm not thinking about or thinking about wrong that is worth me pondering?
Um, so one of the you had a conversation with I forget what his name is. The
Jeremy?
conversation you had, Jeremy. You had a conversation with Jeremy a week ago, and um, just the verbiage of how you explained yourself in that conversation, I found very deeply disturbing.
Hmm.
And it wasn't because you were coming to the wrong conclusions. It was because you were coming to the right conclusions from the wrong direction. So that's why I use that math term. 4 plus 4, or 2 plus 2 equals 4. 16 divided by 4 equals 4. Therefore, we came to the same uh, point, and there we've arrived, and therefore we shouldn't worry about how we got to it. Um, or some other erroneous math that you're like,
Hmm.
I don't know what this child put on this paper, but it's not how you figure out what 2 plus 2 equals.
Hmm.
I don't know where 22 came from, but it shouldn't be there.
Hmm. But
And
so what is that? Because I'm not sure. I can't. I get that you're saying we got to the same thing different ways, but
yeah,
what is it?
so the presentation you came from is what I would term as nihilistic, um, results oriented, um, uh, it's a results oriented nihilism that disregards humanity as the as the foundation for proper reasoning. Um, so you the pathway of your conversation was in a lot of respects that humans are just chemistry, and we regard them because they have the capacity to think. And because they have the capacity to think, we give this set of chemistry a little more consideration than any other chemistry. But if chemistry is capable of thinking or sentience or any sort of self-preservation instinct, that we should give them the same consideration as humans, because all we are valuing is the capacity to think, the capacity to be sentient, the capacity to suffer.
Hmm.
Um, because all chemistry is equal, and therefore we only value humans so long as they meet this criteria. And um, the problem with that is sort of the no true Scotsman fallacy. So if if the capacity for reason, if having an IQ that is at least 85, if all of these things were true, you would be excluding, to go back to the IQ example, that where it's a perfect thing. Um, that bottom 5%
Mm-hmm.
that does not meet the 85 to 115 bell curve, all of the um, you know less developed individuals,
Yeah, I know,
they
I get
they
you. So
would be excluded from the consideration of humanity, and therefore completely justified in mass euthanasia. If
yeah, so
and
if
one
I
of the
valued,
examples you gave was like, if people were sleeping, it'd be okay to kill them. And so long as we nuke a city while everybody's asleep, there's no transgression made.
no, 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 no,
And
no.
that presentation I found really, really disturbing.
I think that part was misunderstood. So let me respond to that, and then I have a question to the thing you said a second ago about. Let me just make myself a note here. Okay, so the sleeping thing, and maybe that's like the thing you were talking about earlier, where you're saying that sometimes things will come across wrong to people, and then if the people hearing it like that idea, then it can create bad in human or something like that. But what I was saying in that hypothetical, and that was a wild hypothetical, was that essentially if a person fell asleep and then during their sleeping time they are nothing, and when they wake up it will be a new person, it would be identical to like a mother giving birth to a new person, a brand new person. And in between, so one day on day one you have a person just living their life, and then day two you have an entire different person who never existed, that if you let them exist they'll exist and live there, that they'll live that day. If in between the sleep period between those two people there was just essentially nothingness, there was just a vessel that was there to become a brand new person. My example to Jeremy when I was talking to him was that ending that possibility to create a new person potentially for no reason at all, I wouldn't view as a bad thing. Does that make sense? Because I think there was a
Yeah, you you
misunderstanding there.
you you were trying to present a transporter problem. So the transporters in what is it, Star Trek, where they disassemble all of the atoms and chemistry that make a human, and then send that information somewhere else and reconfigure it.
But
And
no,
if
because that would be sending the same human. This was in a hypothetical where he
Well,
was
you're not
saying,
sending the same human because you're
"Oh,
reconfiguring them with local atoms in the new place.
oh, okay, then I just don't understand the Star Trek thing." Okay, I got you. Um,
Um, well, the transporter thing is like, if we send a 3D printer of some sort that is capable of building a human, and then we destroy you here, but we send all of the information to Mars, and then that 3D printer, using local atoms that exist there, rebuilds everything that makes Carson
mhm.
at a molecular level. Um, I kill that. I see that as a killing of you and a rebirth of a facsimile of you that is inherently different.
I
Um,
I hear you, and that's interesting, and I don't know how I would view that, and I view this completely different. So here's an example. If somebody is in a coma, and they will never come out of it. If the professional doctor's opinion is this person is brain dead, essentially, they will never come back. Do you think pulling the plug is fine?
In many cases, yes. And I would even be willing to keep them on life support for 6 days in order to facilitate flying in and or busing in 16 people to receive various organs and skin grafts and so
Okay.
forth in
But
order to benefit from their execution.
is there a potential version of somebody being in a coma where when it's perfectly explained to you and you have all the information, you would go, yes, in this specific case, pull the plug? That potential exists, right?
Yes.
Okay. So essentially what I was saying with Jeremy would be, if I was talking with you, it would be that. It would be um a person, we'll say me, lives out my day. I have a great day. And the second I go to sleep, I become that coma person that you're talking about, that where you say that would be a person worth pulling the plug. Now, while I lay there being a person worth pulling the plug, there will never be a Carson ever again. Then a brand new human, like if somebody was giving birth and just birthed a new human, would wake up, and there is zero connection to me, and then they would live their day out, and then as soon as they fall asleep, they would go in that state that you specifically, Mister8658, specifically you would say that that's worth pulling the plug on. Yet the thing that's worth pulling the plug on, and it doesn't matter if you pull the plug or not, um, well, I guess it matters if you pull the plug or not. But if you don't pull the plug, then they'll become a new human. So people pulling the plug or not would just be based on the idea if people think that there should be new humans created. So if there was some misunderstanding where you thought I was saying that you should kill people in their sleep, that was not my claim. It just sounded like that.
Yeah. Um, so rather than sleep, it's a nightly coma that is indistinguishable from brain death and
Correct.
indistinguishable from, um, organ failure and other things. Um, and then you wake up every morning um, after 9 hours of being in this completely irreversible coma, inexplicably, and are human again. Um, that's a weird situation, and um, I I wouldn't want you destroyed, and I wouldn't want the new you destroyed or anything. I would want you to always sleep in a medical facility so that they could study the hell out of you.
Right. So for me, the idea is just that I don't have any concern with a new human coming into existence unless I had more information to make me think I wouldn't. And I don't have any problem with them not coming into existence. And so that was just a way for me to explain that, like, I I value pleasure and I devalue suffering, and the idea of creating a human, I just have no stance on. I don't think it's good or bad or whatever. Separate from the idea of is life better off with an X amount of humans or whatever. And so,
So
anyways, that was just based on the idea of this discussion about would it be worth pressing the button to make 100 people appear on an island, and that's all that was.
yeah,
It wasn't
and
anything. Yeah.
I would always press the button to make another 100 humans exist, even if it existed many light years away, 7,000 light years away, so that there's no capacity to send or receive signals because it's so far away, galaxies and galaxies away.
Mhm.
I would press a button so that they would exist because their interaction with me does not predicate their value. Their humanness is the consideration that gives them value. And um, 100 more humans existing is exclusively a beneficial thing, because the larger and larger the number of humans there are, the larger and larger the the collaboration of human effort yields disproportionate benefit. So it's good for 100 people to exist. It's even better for 1,000 people to exist. It's even better for 10,000 people to exist. It's even better for 100,000 people to exist, so on and so forth, into the trillions of humans.
Gotcha. Okay. Gotcha. Well, I think we should save getting deep into that for another conversation. I got about 15 minutes, and I want to make sure that we talk about the idea of animals.
Yeah.
But before we talk about animals, I just want to test something. So I know that like the that you view humans as having something intrinsic that makes you value them, separate from pleasure and pain. But even even separate from that, if you could press a button to make a random good human not feel suffering, you'd probably do it. Um, Mike, one question I have for you: if you just take this book right here, got a book. If hypothetically this book
That's a good book.
if hypothetically this book could feel pain, um and it was just sitting there, and then you knew, like, you're walking past and you know that this book is feeling pain. It can't see, it can't hear, it will say it has a central nervous system, and and it can feel pain, and that's all that's happening. It feels pain, and you could press a button that would make it not feel the pain anymore. But there's nothing else to it. It's just it's feeling pain. You can just press a button. It takes you a second, and then you go on with your day. Do you press a button to make it not feel pain if it's that simple to you and it is feeling pain?
Not necessarily. There has to be other considerations to cross that threshold.
Okay, well, what would it be? And let's say that you don't even have to take the effort of pressing the button. Like it doesn't take any time out of your day. You just look at it and you know all you have to do is think that you want the pain not there. The pain's gone, and then you go about your day. So we'll say that that the worst thing it does to you is it interrupts your thinking process for 3 seconds. So what are the considerations?
Um, the consideration is not just the ability to perceive and or experience pain. It is the human around that book's perception of the pain. So let's do this with dogs, because
Well, really quick before it's dogs, you are the human around it, and you know that it's perceiving pain the same way that you perceive pain. Is
I
that
I
enough? Is that
wouldn't
enough?
I wouldn't press the button.
You wouldn't.
No.
Why?
Because of whether it's a book or a plant, or some other thing that's inanimate entirely, but has the capacity to perceive pain, like several plants and other things do. Would I do something to alleviate that? No, because that is nature and or natural things operating as intended, and interfering with that is meddling that I'm not going to do. Now, if that realization that certain plants can experience pain and send out, chemical triggers and be like, hey, I'm feeling pain, prepare yourselves. All of the other plants around me start producing an acidic um, oil on your leaves so that you don't get eaten like I'm being eaten. And that plant communication, which does exist and has been recorded, um, if that is causing Sweet Sally Sue to be unreasonably um, discomforted, I would then push the button in empathy towards Sweet Sally Sue.
Okay, well, hold on, hold
Um,
on, hold on. I do hear all the things you're saying, and I think it is fascinating. I just want to focus on this book real quick. So, you're saying you wouldn't press it because it's the natural state of just what's existing. So let's say that it's not. It's that there is something like there's another person walking, and let's say you're a mind reader or a future teller, whatever we want to call it, and you can tell that that person's about to accidentally step on the book, and that's what's going to give it the pain. It's going to feel the pain the same way if your foot got stepped on. And so, separate from its natural things it might do, like a plant or whatever, right now we're just looking at it as a book that's out in the wild. It's a natural book, and you know that this other person that happens to be walking is about to accidentally step on it. And if you let them know, like, oh hey, you're about to step on this book, and the book's going to feel pain, just like if either of our feet got stepped on. And you let's say you even magically know that if you let that walker know, they will walk around it and not step on it. Would you then do that if it took very little of your effort to do one time?
um, I would avoid stepping on the book myself.
Hmm.
Um, would I tell somebody else not to step on the book? Maybe.
Okay.
I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
um,
Okay.
but like when this is applied to like plants or when this is applied to dogs or
Hmm.
some other thing, um, I only want veterinarians to prescribe Xanax to dogs and all of this other stuff insofar that it alleviates the suffering of the human, because they're in distress because their pet is perceived to be in distress.
Okay.
And so prescribing the dog Xanax is a kindness that I am willing to afford the owner.
Okay. Well, okay. And I hear that. So let me change it up. And again, I'm not trying to like turn you vegan or anything. I'm not trying to. This isn't an attempt to be
Well, and that's the
this is
other
just a pain
thing.
and suffering thing. Well, hold on, just real quick. So, um, if you were out in the wild and just out in nature going on a hike, and then you watch some random human walk up to a duck that was just waddling around, and the duck didn't notice the human. Normally, they would scurry away. I think scurrying might be the word for what a duck would do, waddle away. Um, and the human just kicks the duck. The duck like gets kicked like 10 feet. It like maybe it hurts its wing, and then the person just keeps on walking the same way that if you're walking past like a tree and you just pull a leaf because you're just pulling the leaf. But but in this case it's kicking a duck and it goes 10 feet. They're not going to eat the duck or anything. They're just they kick it, it goes 10 feet, and then they just keep walking on their way. Would you view that person? How would you view that person?
Um, completely indifferent.
Really? Like you
Yeah.
would feel indifferent about the person, or you view them as an indifferent person?
Um, I would regard them as having indifference to causing pain and suffering in lesser beings.
Yeah,
And that
we
would,
don't
but
we don't
I
need
would
to
also be indifferent to knowing that fact,
Mhm.
for the most part, but it would taint my perspective of them, but
Mhm.
um, it wouldn't exclude them from anything. It's just that that's a bad choice to make,
Okay.
but it's not a, well, I guess it's kind of a violent choice.
Would
I
you want
mean,
to talk?
strictly
Would you want
speaking.
to talk to them with your understanding of how like a duck might feel pain, and knowing that I guess knowing that you don't know what they got out of it, they might get joy out of kicking it, they might not, but just knowing that they kicked it and walked on, and you don't know any, like, would you want to talk to that person?
Yes.
Okay, and what would you talk to them about? Like, what would you? Yeah, how'd the conversation go? You think?
Yeah, it would be what the hell was that? Um,
Right?
um, but it's not because that kind of violence towards lesser beings is typically a testing of limits for the desire to do it to other humans. With sociopaths and so forth, they tend to start by kicking ducks or cats or dogs in the face and eventually get to the point where they're victimizing humans more explicitly.
Mhm.
I would want to intercede a little bit, but um, I don't give that same consideration to the book or plants,
Yeah, yeah. Okay.
only
Well,
to animals that have more developed animalness.
yeah.
Um, so, you know, if somebody stepped on a slug, I wouldn't care.
Mhm.
I might not
Well, here,
even
let me
notice.
let
But
me
if
do a
they
little
kicked a
back and
duck in
forth
the
with.
face, I would notice, you know?
Yeah, I want to do a little back and forth on the duck. I'm only kind of cutting in because of having a lack of time, and I find this interesting. And we'll be able to do this again and dive into it deeper. But let's say that you were just say to the guy, "What the heck was that?" And then he says like, "Oh, I just wanted to kick it or whatever." And then you were saying or thinking that you have this concern that it could mean that this person is a psychopath or whatever, and then let's say that magical hypothetical, you are satisfied with knowing he's not. He just says like, oh, I think it's kind of fun to kick ducks, but I will never harm a human. And then you could press like a button's pressed where this individual that kicked the duck will never harm a human. You don't get to know anything else about them. You don't get to know if they're going to kick more ducks or if they're going to kick other animals or anything about their future. You will just know, like, we're erasing the possibility of this person being a psychopath and treating other humans bad. And then it makes me wonder, like what would you say to him? How would you feel about him knowing that he likes to kick ducks?
Um, I would consider him depraved, but um, I could give deference to that if he was suitably productive. Um, and be like, okay, this dude likes to kick ducks in order to get his aggression out because he has a really stressful, demanding job. But on the whole, it's okay because whatever. Or
Mm.
conversely, another justification would be I kicked the duck in the face because the duck was causing harm or was going to you know, try and mate with a pigeon, which would have killed the pigeon. And so I kicked
Gotcha.
the duck in the face.
Okay, so let's
Um,
let's let's say that the duck is not causing harm. Would you think that there should be a law in place in a society, like in your ideal
yes,
society?
animal cruelty is a good law.
Okay. So unnecessary animal cruelty. So ignoring the idea of having animals for eating, hunting animals for eating, and a handful of things like having dogs for protection, that kind of thing.
Yes.
You would say that in your ideal society, we can just say in the US, you think that it would be good that if anybody were to walk up to an animal, let's say a mammal, and kick it in the face, and that was caught on surveillance footage, and there was zero reason for it. Like it wasn't anything like the animal was going to harm the person.
Yep.
You kick it in the face. You would think there should be like a
10
day in.
hours of community service.
Okay, yeah, some kind of thing like that. And then if it happens again, then maybe just like other things with a second offense or something else. Okay,
Yeah, second
cool.
offense, 20 hours community service. Third offense, 30 hours. 74th offense, 740 hours.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Does it ever get to the point where this thing is happening enough, it's a bad enough thing that it should cause like a day in jail or something like that?
Nope, because 74 or 740 hours of community service is a time constraint.
Mm. Oh, okay, so they
And
have the community service, and if they don't do it, then just like not doing what you're supposed to do, you would have a warrant for your arrest. But as long as they do the community service, they're fine.
yeah.
Okay, cool, cool. Okay. Um,
And so, yeah, if somebody racks up, thousands of hours of community service, that's weeks and weeks of their life that you are taking from them with no compensation because they keep doing this behavior. But I think that habitual behavior deserves expounding or expanding consequences until you meet the threshold on which they make the calculation that it's no longer worth it to do the problem. So, like a billionaire gets a speeding ticket. Oh, it's only $150. I'll pay that as many times as you want. Well, okay, cool. You got your first speeding ticket, it's $150. You got your second speeding ticket, it's 300. You got your fourth, it's 450, so on and so forth. Eventually, hopefully, eventually if he speeds enough and gets caught enough, now the fine is, $83,000. He's going to make a different calculation because driving from point A to point B is no longer worth $83,000.
yeah. Yeah, well, and in that case, after a certain amount of tickets and losing your license, that might be enough to talk him into it. Because yeah, the monetary value wouldn't matter to him. So yeah,
Yeah,
that's
that's the
interesting.
problem with, you know, penalized by a fine means acceptable for a price. And that's why I believe in escalating consequences because the base consequences obviously are not enough to deter you. So we are going to expand that consequence until it is enough to deter you.
Mm.
And that's why I like, escalating um, sentencing for habitual offenders. Because right now, one of the things we have in our criminal system is these individuals that get arrested 96 times and have 44 convictions for petty crimes already on their thing, where they do 30 or 60 days in jail, 44 separate occasions, and then they're back out on the streets, and then they commit some sort of heinous crime like that Irina girl in Georgia.
Yeah.
The perpetrator on that had been arrested over 60 times, been convicted of over 30 offenses, and had spent over 8 years of his life incarcerated, and yet he was still out on the street. You shouldn't have that situation. You need escalating consequences in order to allow the deterrence of consequences to shape action in a more productive way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I'm pretty sure I agree with you. I don't know to what extent, to what details, but I definitely agree with you. But hey, I do got to hop off here, but it has been a really good talk, and I want to dive deeper into this animal portion at some point. But I also want to dive deeper into the human portion, as far as the humans being created on other planets and whatnot. So yeah, you gave me a lot to think about, and yeah, I'm glad we had the talk. Let's do it again soon.
All right, you have a great day. Oh,
Mhm.
before you leave,
Yeah.
you were talking about bread and yeast and all, and I'd like
Oh,
to
yes.
have a voice chat with you at some point soon.
Yeah, yeah, let's do it. My wife has been making lots of different types of bread recently, and she's trying to grow a yeast or sourdough starter right now. So I was trying to
Yeah.
track down some people that might have some information on that.
Yeah,
So yeah,
I
let's
have
talk
had
about it.
periods of my life, especially during lockdown, where I was making daily bread, and
Oh,
so
cool.
having mother dough was a um, beneficial thing. And we'll talk about that off stream.
Awesome. Sounds good. All right. Take care, my friend.
All right, bye bye.